14th, 2024. Please join the board with the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Canty, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's meeting of the Plymouth Select Board is taking place in a hybrid format. Members of the board are joining us in person. Members of the public or presenters may be joining us virtually over the Zoom webinar platform. Members of the public who wish to participate in this meeting may do so by joining us physically at the Town Hall, at the Great Hall at Town Hall, or may do so by joining us over Zoom on the webinar link that is printed on the posted agenda on the town website. You can also observe the meeting by watching television, Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 47, or at PAC TV's website. And these modifications to the open meeting law were made by the legislature in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Canty. The first order of business will be a public hearing, annual all-alcohol club license. In accordance with Chapter 138 of the Massachusetts General Laws as amended, notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held in Plymouth Town Hall, 26 Court Street on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 at 6 p.m. to consider the application for an annual all-alcohol club license from West Plymouth Social Club Incorporated, doing business as West Plymouth Social Club Incorporated, 101 Carver Road, Unit A4, Vincent Joffrey, manager. Description of premises is as follows: 3,800 square feet, ground floor space, dining room, bar room, and private event room, as well as accessory food prep and bathroom facilities. One entrance exit, one emergency exit. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter should now plan to attend this meeting. I now declare this meeting open. And you'll be speaking for the applicant. Please make sure the microphone's on, the green light, and you speak close, please.
Mic is on. Okay, you can hear me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the board. I'm Attorney Jim Heffernan at Rich May. I'm the attorney to the applicant. I'm also here with Renee Torres, the manager of record for under the liquor license. I have materials. I have the green cards as well for the abutters notice and my abutters affidavit, which I can give to the clerk when ready. I also have the site plan. If you want to see it again, it's the same that was in the application, but I have copies for you all if you would like copies of that. The request here is for the select board to approve the annual all alcohol club license. To give you kind of the process backwards, this has been a long process, not because of the town, mainly because of COVID and changing retail. We met with Karen Keene of the Board of Health to confirm regulations and enforcement on the private club aspect of a social club. We also have been with the Department of Special Services for the right to use a private club. This is really that final step to get the liquor license piece of that. As I kind of hinted at, in the changing world of retail and strip malls, you're seeing them change. So what my client's really looking to do here is a unique experience for any adults that would like to join a club, to have a drink, smoke a cigar, watch TV, have music, but it is only in that club. It's members only, and it will comply with the Mass General Law 270, Section 22, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, the regulations under 105 CMR 661. And the idea, too, is not only retail has changed, but this world we live in where everyone's on social media, the idea is let's create a destination in the West Plymouth Square area. It's a small area, just over 3,000 square feet, an area where members only can meet and, again, have a drink, smoke a cigar, and that's really the focus of the club. It is a nonprofit to meet the social club standards of the regulations. It's 3,800 square feet. It's ground floor space, as you mentioned, at Unit A4 at 101 Carver Road. Seating is 458. Occupancy is 75, but the seating is only for 58, 12 at the bar, 46 in the lounge area. It's not open to the public, and it's only to serve members of the association. They're invited guests, one or more salaried employees, and extent there ever were visiting members of an affiliated chapter. There's no other affiliated chapters, but what I'm reciting to you is the public health law regarding private clubs. The club will also have a small menu of items. There's a small kitchenette, so it's a short list of food. Hours, starting out, it's going to be minimal because they need to ramp up membership. The intention, once fully operational, is Monday through Wednesday, 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., Tuesday, noon to 11 p.m., Friday, Saturday, noon to 1 a.m., and then Sunday, noon to 10 p.m. Ideally, there's memberships. Members want to come and enjoy. They want to be open. That's really the sum of it. It's a small social club in the West Plymouth Square area. Renee or myself are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, before we get to that part with this part of the board, I'm going to open it up and see if anybody in the audience or anybody online wants to speak in favor of this application. Anyone in either online or in this room want to speak in opposition? Okay, at this time, I'm going to bring it back to the board for questions and comments. Mr. Blitzer?
Yes, Council, I have a...
Is your light on?
It will be.
There you go.
I have a couple of questions, Councilor, and the reason being is this is the first time I think this has been done, certainly since I've been on the board. You know, we have a ton of social clubs in Plymouth, private clubs, but this is the first time that a private owner, for-profit, wants to open a nonprofit. I'm being in the restaurant business myself and the bar business. I find it, even though I've been involved in some that didn't make a profit, but that's just because the economy was bad. But it's I haven't seen this done, so I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, what is the nonprofit? Where will the, because it will be profitable, I would hope, but where will the profits go?
The profits are going to pay salary employees and pay rent. That's the intention. Again, it's a small space. It's meant to kind of draw folks to West Plymouth Square and the strip mall area. It's not to be a massive profit center.
Let me let you, I'm for this, because I think a cigar bar, I don't drink, but I smoke cigars, and I know a lot of people that do that love it. When I go on vacation, I've gone in, there's actually, Boston has some, they have them, down the Cape has some cigar bars. But it's just interesting, the membership. What's the membership fee?
I don't think we've determined the membership fee yet. Not been determined.
In other words, is it $1, $5? I mean, somebody coming in. If somebody's coming in for one time because they're in town, you certainly can't charge them $50 or $100. They're just not going to do it.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to get, trying to get this through my head, and I'm for it, but this doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, unless you think they're going to have a cigar in there and then go to the G-Pub next door.
The hope is people use the other services in the whole strip mall area in the plaza. I mean, it's to draw people to the area and become a use that otherwise it would sit empty.
So do the members own the club, or who owns the club?
The ownership of the club will be the nonprofit, so members will be part of that nonprofit. There'll be an executive position that will manage it, but there's no... The owners are the members, you're correct.
And it says the manager is Vincent...
Geoffroy, correct.
So not Renee. Renee's the manager of...
That's a mistype. He's really the president of the nonprofit in the corporate structure.
But
Renee would be the manager of the liquor license.
So she's going to be on the license?
Correct.
Renee's on the license, so
Correct.
she's responsible.
Correct.
Okay, there's a lot of responsibility there, too. There's only one entrance, so you can't get in from the G-Pub. So the public, they have to go through the front doors, and they have to, is there going to be somebody scanning them in, or how? Just trying to think.
I think we're working on an online application or through the phone, just kind of like the QR code to make sure people's membership.
The reason why I'm asking all these questions is because if somebody sees it, people might follow your lead. They may want to do this, so I just want to get this right.
Mhm.
And I know I had somebody email me from, I believe it was 92, one of your neighbors who was interested. I'm surprised he's not on the Zoom, but, and I don't know if he's in favor or against, he didn't say it, but, so I just want to get this right.
Yeah.
So you haven't determined the nonprofit yet?
No, the nonprofit is determined. We haven't determined what the membership fee would be. My
What
guess,
was the nonprofit again? I didn't hear you.
the name?
Yeah,
It's the West Plymouth Social Club, Inc.
that's the nonprofit.
Correct, and it's been formed, and it's been approved by the mass revenue for the
Where do you
private club
anticipate the funds going?
to pay salaries and pay rent.
Okay.
I mean, again, the idea is a social club to draw it in.
I mean, I don't want to, like I said, I'm in favor of this, but I don't want to get too, how much of the salary is going to be?
I don't think that's been
It just
determined
depends
yet
on
either.
what you make?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on if membership grows, it grows. If it doesn't, then we have to figure something else out. But the idea
In
is,
other words, if it makes 300,000, is that going to be the salary for the,
if it makes 300,000, we're doing very well. I guess we'll have to
but it's a
figure out what we're
nonprofit.
doing with that. Yeah,
It's got to go somewhere.
yeah, it's
So
got to go.
I'm just saying, there's a lot of, if I'm asking this, there's a lot of people out there probably asking the same thing.
Understood, but the Attorney General's office manages the nonprofits, and it makes sure that they follow the nonprofit charter, and this will be for the social club, so it'll be for the benefit of the members. So improvement, new furniture, new TVs, the smoking, you make sure the filters and everything go through it, so it's not intending to be a massive profit center for that club. It's hoping that people come over, go to the restaurant, use the other services of other tenants, not necessarily being a big draw for just the cigar.
Again, I should be asking questions, but I'm done. My last comment is that Mr. Joffrey's put a lot of money into that plaza. He's done a great job. It looks great. He improved the liquor store, he improved G-Pub, that whole plaza. It looks much nicer. The parking lot's nicer. So I can't get it through my head that he wants to have a nonprofit there. I would think he wants to make some money. I would think maybe he wants to put a business in there that he can make money with.
You draw a good point, the improvement into those buildings, and the intention is to improve all the buildings in the plaza to match what you're seeing in the front. And so if you have certain things, again, retail's changed in this country. You can't just have a bunch of retail stores. So it's almost like an amenity to add to draw people there.
And the last thing, I was hoping you were going to come out and say that it was a Plymouth organization that was going to get the profits, because I know there's a club in town that, there's a sportsman club that it goes to Plymouth North and South. It's a sportsman club, and that's where the money goes. And it's owned by the members, so just something to keep in mind, so.
I know the restaurant does Teacher Appreciation Month this month, and I know they've talked about donating towards
No,
other
the
things like that as well.
nonprofit? Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're separate entities, so.
Separate entities, but I know the Joffrey family definitely considers that. And in fact, in our discussions with the Board of Health, we're talking about giving that back to Board of Health or whatever they see fit for either smoking campaigns or things like that, because it is a sensitive issue. Some people are very anti-smoking, and a lot of people recognize the health benefits of not smoking. So it's meant to be very private in that respect.
A little history on this, because in 2004, when this went through, I scratched my head because they were voting on it, and then town meeting realized that the clubs that they belong to, and a lot of town meeting members, like myself, belong to, if not one, multiple clubs, private clubs. And when they finally realized that tomorrow they're going to have to go back to their club and tell them, you guys can't smoke here anymore, all of a sudden they amended it to leave out private clubs. So I said to myself, when I was sitting with a bunch of other restaurateurs, if it's unhealthy in restaurants, in public bars, but it's not unhealthy in private clubs. It didn't make sense to me, so it's, anyway, that's all I have to say on this. And I'm not trying to.
No, it's good questions. Thank you.
I'm not trying to cause problems.
Mr. Canty, then Mr. Helm.
So you mentioned that one of the expenses that the nonprofit would pay would be rent.
Correct.
Who is the nonprofit's landlord?
It is also, Joffrey owns the plaza, so there is a lease in place.
So it's a nonprofit, but it pays rent to a profit-earning organization?
Correct.
So isn't that just a for-profit organization with an extra staff?
Not necessarily, no. Any nonprofit that rents out space has to pay rent. I represent
Right,
many theater groups that also pay rent.
well, right, but a lot of most nonprofits probably have landlords, but they're not landlords that are also on the board of the nonprofit.
There will be other members in this club, so if they don't like the membership fee, that will be adjusted. But it's not a above market rent, so it's not a play to get extra profit out of it.
But I don't know what the rent is, but the rent could be, in a year where the club brought in more money, the rent could be increased to take the money out of the nonprofit and into the profit-earning organization, correct?
Not if the AG's office has something to say about it and thinks that they are skirting the nonprofit rules. The rent is, I don't have the exact rent figures on me, but the Joffreys charge standard rent to all their entities. They are common to own the real estate where they also have businesses.
Is the rent on a term of years, or is it on a tenancy at will, month-by-month basis?
Tenancy in years.
How many years?
I did not have, that's the one thing I didn't bring, but it's usually, because I draft them myself, it's probably 10 years. But I don't hold me to the exact term, but it is a term of years, and I believe it started on January 1st.
And you don't know what the rent figure is?
If you give me a second, I can look to see if it's usually reported in the liquor license application, because ABCC wants to see the lease, and the copy of the lease is provided to them as well. Oh, that's right. Not to get overly complicated, this site has there's a sub-landlord on this site, so that some of those buildings have different entities. Mm-hmm. Again, not to get overly structured, but the rent on this is 10% of that base rent, which is what is reported in the liquor license application. I don't have the dollar figure of that, but that 10% reflects roughly 10% the square footage of that building in total. So it's paying its equal share compared to the other tenants in that building.
But so in that situation, if the rent of the other building or the entire building goes up, the percentage would therefore go up, right?
Correct, but that affects everyone in that building.
Right, but I guess with the owner-operator also being the landlord, it's taking money from your left hand and putting it in your right hand, right?
It's paying, otherwise it goes to another tenant that takes the space that's going to pay the exact same rent. So, yes, it's another entity, but they own multiple entities and have multiple businesses. Many people have their own tenant entities that own real estate with a similar related entity. And in fact, Mr. Joffrey has a bank here that has financial covenants to pay rent to cover the mortgage. So again, I don't want to get in the weeds on the financeability, but a bank won't loan money unless they see rent coming in. So whether it's 10% from this nonprofit,
right,
or 10% from someone totally unrelated, it's the same number.
Right, but in one of Mr. Bletzer's comments referenced that other businesses may want to do something similar to this, right? So if you had another business that wanted to be able to have a cigar bar or some other indoor smoking component, following this model, they could create a sublease for a nonprofit and use that to use a similar structure to your lease there and still acquire what would become profit through a rent-structured apparatus, and be maybe technically compliant with the law. I don't know how the AG's office would feel about that. I don't work for the AG's office, but it's not exactly in the spirit of the law from the sounds of it. I think a social club is not per se. I don't know that this is what was envisioned when this particular provision was passed. So is there anything that you could tell me that would make it impossible for someone to do what I just described. Another business to sublease out their space in a similar way to this to create an indoor smoking experience and still earn what is essentially profit through extra steps.
I guess I'm not seeing how that's illegal. I mean, it's legal in this country. It's legal in this state. It's approved by the AG's office. It's approved by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. If someone pumps up their lease rent and it's being vetted by the ABCC, another state agency, there's multiple government agencies reviewing what a private person is trying to do with their own business. That's the landlord side. Mm-hmm. There's also a bank involved. So I don't know what to tell you if other people can't do it. I can tell you many businesses own their real estate as well and pay rent to their left hand to their right hand.
I'm aware of that, but you're introducing a nonprofit into the mix. So a nonprofit is supposed to operate as a nonprofit.
Correct.
Right? So, but putting that in that mix allows the nonprofit to not really operate like a nonprofit, right? Because the profit is still being made, it's just being made with an extra step.
The profit's being made by the landlord, though, not the nonprofit, and the nonprofit's paying market rent. So
landlords on both sides of that, in the nonprofit and outside of it, right?
Not necessarily. Again, a nonprofit, there's no owners of a nonprofit. There's an executive director or president. You have members, so they all can.
I'm aware of that, but I'm talking in this particular scenario. The owner is on both sides, right?
In the fact that they're running it, yes, but
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Helm?
So I'm looking at the seating chart, and the architectural drawing of what you're proposing. And, you know, and this relates to the concept of the revenue will go to pay salaries and pay rent. This looks extremely capital intensive. Somebody is putting a lot of money into this space. Who is putting all this money into this space? And how are they going to get a return when all profits or all monies only go to rent or salary?
Joffrey put money into this to make it, again, an experience for the West Plymouth Square.
Okay, so
they also enjoy smoking cigars and having a drink indoors, so that it's partly a personal preference.
So do you have any idea how much this build-out is going to cost?
It's already reported in the application on the financial section because build-out has already been done. It was reported at $200,000.
Okay, that's about what I figured it would be.
Yeah.
So that's sort of just the Joffrey, the ownership donating it. They're
Correct.
not expecting any payment beyond rent?
No, they're not.
Is their rent calculated on the fact that they are renting a space that somebody in the nonprofit has actually renovated?
They are not. No, again, it's 10% based
10%
off the master lease for the whole
All right,
building.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. Bledsoe?
One last question. I think I know the answer, but somebody has asked me to ask this, and it's open to all members, male, female. This is not a private men's club.
No, not at all. It's men, women,
that's what I
adults.
figured.
Adults, no children, no minors.
No, because somebody's watching. And
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I know when people hear social club, they think of fraternities and
No, I
sororities.
get-
It's
yep,
not that
yep.
at all. Yeah.
So,
How many people are gonna seat?
It seats 58 total, 12 at the bar, 46 in the lounge area.
This one. Going back years ago, when we put the smoking ban in place, I voted against it. And I was definitely in the minority, and probably right now I look back on it for a good reason. And I service restaurants and all that jazz, so I was really into what was going on with the restaurants, and I really believed that it was going to affect them and they were going to close. and it didn't whatsoever. And I'm also members at some of the local clubs, some of the men's clubs, and now they've moved their smoking sections outside. So I'm wrestling with that, and I'm also going to wrestle with the fact that business people are investing in a nonprofit not to make money. I mean, it just doesn't fly that way in my eyes, and I have several businesses. I mean, either it's nonprofit or it's not. I just, if you were to ask me, am I going to go open a nonprofit just so I can open it and be a happy nonprofit? No, the answer is definitely not. I do plenty for nonprofit, don't get me wrong, but if you're asking me if I want to go take $500,000 and invest it in a nonprofit, you're going to get a quick NO from me. So in my eyes, I'm going to call it like I see it, because that's what I've been doing. And it's really a way of skirting just to get the cigar bar. And that's really the only way you can do it, is to be a nonprofit. So that's what we're really doing here tonight. So,
Well, I will say, if I may.
yes, you may.
We were looking at the cigar bar element of it. That's partly why it took so long. We originally were going the social club route 4 years ago during COVID, then switched to the cigar bar route, then switched back to the social club route. And part of the issue with the cigar bar route is it requires a pretty food-intensive element to it that this space doesn't really support. There's a retail component of it, too, that requires additional approvals and a cigar tobacco retail license as well. So there are pros and cons to both. And again, this is a small sliver of a bigger plaza. So it's really looking at someone who it's a personal preference to smoke cigars and have a cocktail indoors, but also thinking other adults will like that and they'll come to this West Plymouth Plaza. So I see what you're saying. A business wouldn't want to necessarily sink $500,000 or $250,000 into a business if that was your sole business, but it fits a larger piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to make it clear so people that are watching or sitting here understand what, and there could be other ones, coming forward after this. I mean, so whenever you're sitting here and you're an approval license for something, and this is relatively new to me, then there's probably going to be more to follow. So that's why I'm asking the questions, and I'm literally utterly blunt about the way I put it, just because 17 years you learn a little bit over here,
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I wish everybody the best in what they're doing. I just like to be as transparent as we hear all the time about it as we can, so the people watching can understand. So all right, so I'm going to go to, Charlie touched on a little. So how do I become a member of this club? I mean, am I going to I know you don't have to give me every little detail, but I can walk up, knock on the door and say, it's Dick Quintal, I want to be a member here.
That's going to be the intention. The Board of Health regulations prevent advertising. You can't advertise it out to the public. The hope is members of the community, people that like to come over to the square, or maybe if they're even a little further outside of Plymouth but have the idea of going to a social club, something that they would like to do, and interact with adults not on social media. The plan would be you come knock on the door, fill out an application, pay a
So it'll
fee.
be at the entrance upon arrival.
I think that's the only way we can do it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure this out in my head.
I would imagine there'd be an online application too as well.
There
but
will be online?
I would think so, but
Right.
I don't know if you've. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board, close the hearing. Oh, Mr. Canty, sorry.
I just have discussion.
Okay.
You want a motion or you for discussion?
I'll yield if you'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve this application.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Blitzer, second by Mr. Helm. Discussion?
Thank you.
Mr. Canty.
So while this may be a de jure nonprofit, it is a de facto profit-making entity. It's just an extra step to take the nonprofit's revenue and transfer it into another company that can make profit. Now, as was said at the question and answer, is that illegal? No, it's not illegal. But is it good policy? Because not only does it have to comply with what is legal or not, we are also policymakers. And my concern would be if we open this door here for this particular business to do this, that could expand into other businesses, as was alluded to earlier in the hearing. And I'm not sure that that's in the best interests of Plymouth. There are existing social clubs where smoking indoors is already permitted. I'm not suggesting we revisit that. But this is an expansion into a new territory, which I don't personally see a need for, and I'm uncomfortable with the structuring. I understand that there are lots of complicated lease, sub-organizations in lots of corporate-type structures, but when you're putting a nonprofit in there that's supposed to be a nonprofit, but in a way that allows it to essentially not be one, personally, I find that to be troubling. So I do not intend to vote for this. I will be voting against this, and I would encourage other members to consider not just this application, but the precedent or expectation, rather, that it could set for other applicants in the future looking to perhaps increase their businesses by creating another indoor smoking type environment. Thank you.
Mr. Blitzer?
For discussion. I'm going to support this, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you the reasons. First of all, legally, I don't think we could stop this. It's a membership association, and I went through the law here, the smoking law, and it says very clearly that a membership association is defined as follows: a not-for-profit entity that has been established and operates for a charitable, philanthropic, civic, social, benevolent, educational, religious, athletic, recreational, or similar purpose, and is comprised of members who collectively belong to, and it goes on and on. But they're a nonprofit, they said they are. It's up to, we have agencies. First of all, the Board of Health has approved this, the Attorney General, the ABC, and all three of those agencies will be monitoring this business. And very clearly, too, that this is not open to the public. It can't be open to the public. It's not allowed. You do not have to go in there if you don't want to. Just like you don't have to belong to the John Alden Club or any of the other clubs in Plymouth if you don't want to. You don't have to work there if you don't want to. So so nobody's being put into a dangerous situation unless they want to. So I don't know how we can stop it. And quite frankly, cigar bars are very popular. I understand, and Kevin's not wrong about some things, but legally I don't think we can stop it. And we just got to be careful if another person approaches us. And I want to finish too. Mr. Jeffrey took that decrepit, ugly plaza and revitalized it, and he revitalized that plaza. I can throw a rock from where I am. I drive by it all the time. He spent a lot of money. He spent millions in there. And, I think he deserves a little respect on this. And like I said, he's got 3 serious agencies that are going to monitor him. So I would hope that he's going to do the right thing. And I know Renee, I don't know her, and I don't know Mr. Jeffrey either, but I've been in there and I've seen the way you manage the Jeep Club. And you're there all the time, and you're active, you're interacting with customers, and I would hope that you're going to do the same thing next door. So we're looking to get some economic development. We're looking to, help with our commercial tax bases. Ms. Keene right now coming in the door. So we're looking for this kind of development. Maybe not this kind specifically, but so I am going to vote. After a lot of consideration, I was at home for an hour going through this. I asked a lot of questions upstairs with our council. Before I made this decision, this wasn't just a quick decision. So anyway, I will be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Helm.
Well, I find myself in a rare instance, my time on the board, where I agree with both Mr. Bletzer and Mr. Canty. First of all, Mr. Canty, I mean, the reality is this isn't a nonprofit. We all know it. It's not. It just isn't. It's a way to get a cigar bar, and this is how you have to do it. I know that because I have a friend who wanted to open one and inquired with the health department and found out this is the way you have to do it. So that's what we're doing here. We're either approving or not approving a cigar bar. And I don't, Mr. Joffrey has done an amazing job with that plaza, although I have to say many of us really miss the Ocean State job lot there, and we're tired of driving to Kingston because that was a great Ocean State job lot. That's just an aside. Coming from retail and coming from a restaurant background, somebody with the savvy of Mr. Joffrey does not do a loss leader, as you're suggesting this is. You're suggesting this is to draw people to this complex. It's to draw people to a cigar bar. It is not a loss leader. So, let's be real. This is a for-profit. It needs to be done this way. And over to Mr. Bletzer's side. We do see cigar bars in other areas. It's not, in my mind, outside of the bounds of what is attempting to be created over there in that plaza. And so even though I have issues with the whole kind of presentation, although I know why it has to be presented this way, I have issues with the fact that it's not really a nonprofit. I'm going to vote yes, because it's the way you have to get this done. That's part of what they're trying to create in that series of restaurants. I believe Steakhouse and all these other, entities within a family. So I'm going to vote in favor.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing none. Mr. Blutzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
No.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, no. 3-2. Thank you. Second item is a transfer of an all-annual alcohol restaurant license from E.K. Williams Corporation, doing business as Food Court, 39 Court Street. Eleanor Williams, manager. In accordance with Chapter 138 of the Massachusetts General Laws as amended, notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at Plymouth Town Hall, 26 Court Street, on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, at 6:05 p.m. to consider the application for a transfer of an annual all-alcohol restaurant license from E.K. Williams Corporation, doing business as Food Court, 39 Court Street, Eleanor Williams, manager. Description of premises is as follows. First floor, open concept dining room and bar, 2 restrooms, kitchen. Basement for storage of 1 entrance, 2 exits. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter should plan to attend this meeting. I now declare this meeting open. Would you like to say anything, sir? Identify yourself for the record, if so, and make sure the green light's on, please.
Thank you. Jonathan Whiting for E.K. Williams Corporation. This is a request of a liquor transfer from the current owners of the food court to E.K. Williams. The president of E.K. Williams is here. She's been in the restaurant industry for several decades, from catering to working at golf course restaurants. And I think she'll bring in, a lot of the stuff that food court is currently using, but as well as a couple different twists in the menu as well.
Would you like to say anything? Or? You don't have to, I'm just asking.
I just want to say that I'm very excited about this opportunity, and I always loved Plymouth. I used to work at the Rue Bar, so I was always in love with Plymouth, and this was like an amazing thing.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience or online wishing to speak in favor of this transfer? Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for questions. Mr. Blitzer?
I wish you well on this. I get some questions, though. First of all, John Ricardo, the owner that's transferring this to you, he's still involved?
Yes, he is.
Okay, because we just want to clarify that to make sure, because he's still responsible until the license is transferred.
Yes.
So there was a question on that from somebody, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I believe in the application, part of the asset purchase agreement was for, town as well as ABCC approval, or the deal doesn't move forward. There's no transfer of ownership. So John's been involved tremendously.
Well, quite frankly, if John was involved, you wouldn't be open right now, because you couldn't operate the license without John.
Yes.
So that's when I knew you were open, so I was hoping you were going to say he's still involved.
Yes.
So, second, are you doing the outdoor dining? I don't think we saw an application for that.
So we will be doing the outdoor dining. It was on the original application. However, there was a revision that needed to be made in the description, and it fell off. So I think we're going to be seeking the outdoor dining after the fact.
I think you may want to get going on that, because they've already set them up, and I know your restaurant was very successful when it was open, and I know you needed that outdoor dining because there wasn't enough seats. It's too small. That was the biggest problem. It's too small, and that's a compliment. You need more seats. So, and the food was always good there when I went in there. I hope you're going to continue that. What kind of menu will you be doing in there?
It's basically American, Mediterranean, Southern. It's going to be mixed Asian, so it's going to be, but mostly it's going to be American.
Now, if you work with John,
I'm sorry?
Have you worked with John before?
No, I did not, but
Okay.
we work with we are mutual friend from
Okay.
different chefs around.
Okay, good. Well, listen, I wish you well.
Thank you.
And get if you're going to do the outdoor dining, get on that now, because you got to get that application. It's not too late, is it? Or is it?
The application period closed April 30th. The DPW's already set up the outdoor dining as of last week.
All right. So
You can check with the building department.
Thank
Just the town manager obviously knows what he's talking about, but it's probably too late, so. Yeah. Ignore me, don't ignore him.
Exactly.
Anyway, I wish you well, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? You have a motion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
I vote yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you.
thank you.
Wish you the best.
Thank you.
Welcome to Plymouth.
Thank you.
Moving on to licenses and administrative notes. Any questions, comments? If not, we take them all, or however the board sees fit.
Mr. Chair, if there's no questions from my colleagues, I would make a motion to approve the licenses as a group.
Okay.
I'll second.
For the licenses, motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Helm. Discussion on any of those? Seeing none, Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous. Okay, we have 6 administrative notes.
If there are no questions from my colleagues, I would make a motion to approve the 6 administrative notes as a group.
Second.
Discussion? Just want to add in the notes is the minutes approval of March 19th, April 2nd, and April 16th. Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
And Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous on those. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda items. Independence Day fireworks, rain date update. Mr. Tavares, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, excuse me, and members of the Select Board. I just wanted to come back because the question had come up previously when I was here in regards to rain date and what the process was. And we did have it was prior to our meeting with all of the town safety officials, and the assistant town manager was there as well. So we did have actually that was probably the majority of the discussion while we were there. The decision was made together by 7 p.m. on the 3rd of July is when we need to make kind of the drop dead date or time for if we were having the fireworks the next evening. If we were having the fireworks on a rain date. That rain date would have to be Saturday, July 13th. So not the Saturday after the 4th of July, but the following. And that was a joint decision that was made. We did also have the fireworks. The Pyrotechnico company was on conference call with us, so they're aware of that as well because we needed to make sure they'd be available. So that's the process, and the last bit of that is just as normal, as typical. There is no rain date for the parade, but the fireworks, we would have a rain date of the 13th.
Okay.
And that's about it, I guess.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, just pray it doesn't rain, please, Saturday night. It's
No rain, no fog.
Crazy.
I mean, I can think of a plethora of things I'd like to not see on that night, so.
yeah, no, good luck. Yeah.
Mr. Canty, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, Mr. Tavares, thank you for the update. When do you anticipate, in the event that there is a forecast of rain, that a call would be made one way or the other?
It's by 7 p.m. on July 3rd is the latest that we can make the call. I mean, we can make it obviously earlier. Or, as unfortunate as we had before, where we knew days in advance there was a hurricane coming. Obviously, the sooner we can make it, the better.
Sure.
But also erring on the side of, if we can get something off, we do want to do that just because it is the holiday weekend. And,
Right.
Right.
Okay.
We mess up everybody's plans. So.
No, I understand. I'm anticipating.
But 7 o'clock is our absolute cutoff.
Yeah, I would just anticipate we might get some questions about when that call is actually going to be made so people can plan day of. So.
Sure, and I understand that, but it would probably, I'm going to say, in all likelihood, it would be made sooner, especially if it's a rain event.
Right.
I know, people will start hearkening back to last year, but we ended up having clear. That was a hard one. Fog's a little harder to predict.
Yes.
So.
Understood. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Matt, and the whole committee. Next up, we have an appointment to the Land Use Acquisition Committee. Sharon Clark. Is Sharon Clark in?
I am. Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Telling secrets about me already. Look at this.
We're just so excited.
Calm down.
If you'd like to
You want to talk to me?
It's
I talk
okay.
to
If
you?
you'd like to say a few words about why you're applying for the position and your background, that could be helpful.
I have copies of my resume if anybody wants one. I submitted it with my application. I recently moved to Plymouth after 40 years in Carver. Moved 1 mile over the line to Plymouth. We've been members, my husband and I and family had been members of the First Parish in Plymouth since '86. So Plymouth has been a second home until we just kind of made it official. In Carver, I was on the zoning board for 32 years. I was the chairman of the Redevelopment Authority for 6 years, positions I had to leave when I moved. I have experience in every municipal ad hoc committee that you can possibly think of, rewritten zoning laws. I just did everything. By profession, I'm a real estate title examiner. So when this opportunity came up through a colleague, they put me in touch with Mr. Watkins, I see in the back, thinking I would be a good fit for the Land Use and Acquisition Committee because there's not any part of it that I haven't done in other capacities. And it's not like I'm bored. It's just something I really enjoy doing. And I like to participate. I like planning. I like land use. And I would love to be part of it.
Any questions from board members?
No,
Not you,
just a comment.
Mr. Blitzer.
Not because you're the only applicant, but you're a fantastic, qualifications are unbelievable. Mr. Watkins can second that. And, no, thank you. It's in your blood, and you want to keep
Yeah.
going, and I think it's great. We are so lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
I really believe that. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo with Mr. Blitzer. Thank you for applying, and thank you for all your service, even if it was in Carver. I think it's great. And we have a lot of things going on in Plymouth, so,
You do?
if you have a lot of time, we can take the help, so.
Yep.
Just, keep watching. Okay.
I think Mr. Maine and I will have a discussion at some point about zoning, but I attended the first LUAC meeting last week, and it's a good group. The former chair, John Hammond, and I have been friends for many, many years. So
Okay.
feel free to vote.
Thanks.
And just so you'll know, my dedication to my new town and all, I had tickets to Caitlin Clark's debut down at the Mohegan Sun tonight with my granddaughter, but I am here. She plays for Plymouth Rec, so they live in Plymouth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. I'd make a motion that we appoint Sharon Clark to the LUAC committee.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Yeah,
Congratulations and
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to scoot over to the Plymouth Retiree Assistant Fund. Next.
That's a good idea.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll start the presentation and turn it over to the folks to my left. So just to give the board a little bit of history on what brought us here this evening, back in March of '22, I returned to Plymouth, and early in my tenure, I was invited by Ms. Page to attend a PREA meeting. And at those early conversations, I learned a lot about some of the challenges our retirees face, specifically around their finances. A lot of that, and some of that had to do with plan design changes and the costs associated with those plan design changes. And so then I returned a couple months later, and we continued to hear these conversations, except this time I returned with the Assistant Town Manager, then the Human Resources Director, and our Finance Director, Lynn Barrett. And we continue to have these conversations and these discussions to hear about the challenges our retirees face, how they're on fixed incomes, and that some of them are struggling to pay their medical bills and in some cases even acquire medication. Our pledge at that time was give us some time, let us think about what we can do to assist. We knew we'd be entering PEC, maybe there was an opportunity there. But what we came back with, so we drove back to Town Hall that morning and we were having a discussion, and what we came up with, like a safety net program that we wanted to bring back to PREA to see if something they'd be interested in. And so they were interested, all three, Susan Page, Tom Pinto, and Dale Weber, all here this evening, developed a process in which they will receive applications for those retirees who are in distress and seeking some type of financial assistance for medical needs, and then working with Jackie Gurney, our HR director, they would then process those requests and those approvals through our finance department. So where's the money coming from? The finance department's created what is known as an agency account fund, where money will be deposited into this account to pay for these requests. So whereas this really the true dollars and cents coming from, we hope, from our active employees. So back of the napkin math, we believe that if every active employee donated $1 every week into this fund, we would generate over $50,000 each year into this account to help assist those retirees that are most in need. So that's what brought us today. I'm going to turn it over. I think, Sue, I think you're going to say a few words. This was not rehearsed, so I'll turn it over to Susan. Thank you, Susan.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was going to do the history of the whole thing, but Derek kind of took it over. But the most important thing is there are retirees who are in distress. Like I gave them that example of someone who has been recently diagnosed as a diabetic and has to go to 3, 4, 5 doctors a month, along with the differences in the medication and the increase. And this retiree has been retired a long time. So his pension is not gigantic by any stretch of the imagination. So our initial meeting was to see if the co-pays for Medicare retirees could be eliminated, if you'll remember, or reduced. But we found out that was not possible by law, right? Yeah. So we moved on, and we kept the discussion going. And then Derek came to us with this, and we had a meeting to discuss it's now called the Retiree Assistance Fund. And he brought it to us, and it was just before the PEC opened up. So it wasn't forgotten. It was kind of put over here for a while. And when the PEC was all done, then it came back to the forefront. And now I'll go to my part. Now, the voluntary donation, and Derek mentioned just $1 a week from the active employees would help so many retirees in need. And the monies collected would be under the care of Lynn Barrett and the finance department. We were this far in the process. Then the PEC, it was settled. We came back. Then Tom, Dale, and I, and Doreen Schmidt, with Jackie, put together an application process. The main thing for me was I wanted it simple. I didn't want it complicated, because that kind of would not serve the purpose if it's too complicated. And now I think it's simple as we can make it. And if you look at it, I think you all have the application process in your packet. And you can see right at the bottom, it's going to be reviewed by a group of 3 people, which the 3 people now are Tom, Dale, and myself. Now, that's the history of the whole Retiree Assistance Fund. Now, the one thing that you don't know is that the retirees who are able are interested in donating to this as well. So that's another layer. So we have the active employees and the retirees all working together to help retirees in need, which is so important. Now, Dale has something to add.
Thank you, Susan. For the record, board members, my name is Dale Weber, and I'm appearing before you tonight as the retirement board selected person to represent the retirement board on this committee. I do want to extend my sincere thank you to the town manager, to the assistant town manager, to the Human Resources Director, Jackie Gurney, for their efforts in setting up this committee, getting us all together, and working through the process. There is no doubt, coming from my retirement board seat and representing the interest of the retirement board, as the retirement board will be the collection agency for the completed applications of people needing assistance. Multiple venues will be used to put the application process out into the retiree world, including this town hall, the Plymouth Retirement Board website. But those websites are not interactive websites. They're only used to get the information out there. If members that receive that application process or download it, they will then have to physically fill out the application and return it to the retirement board at 212 South Meadow Road, Unit 3, and the retirement board staff will collate those together, get them to myself as a board member, who I will return it to Sue and Tom Pinto, and we'll get together as a committee and review the very detailed documentation that has to be submitted to these people seeking assistance. Now, again, I said my thank you to the people that involved, and I really do appreciate that. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you my same old story about how employees are the ones reaching into their pockets on this one. Employees, retirees, and I know that Derek is a retiree now. I mean, an employee now. Sorry. And as
Did I miss something last week?
and as a employee, he just offered up to you a mathematical equation that if each person gave $1, that would generate a certain amount of fund. I would hope that Derek would also contribute to this fund as an employee, maybe add a 0 or 2 onto that $1 as far as his contribution to it. But all I'm saying is this is a great initiative. We always are looking for ways to improve on recruitment and retention of employees. Our employees, our current employees, are going to be contributing to this, knowing that full well that they may be a recipient of a need in the future. So again, we're reaching into our pockets to help recruit and retain employees, and we're looking forward to this plan being a success. And again, I want to thank Jackie Gurney, Silvio Janau, and Derek Brindisi for their efforts in this, along with Sue and Priya and Tom Pinto and the Insurance Advisory Committee. And I also want to thank the staff at the Plymouth Retirement Board, because they're going to take on, and also Lynn Barrett in the Finance Committee, because they're going to take on some administrative duties in cutting checks. And again, with retirees getting involved in this as well, I just want to share some information. The Plymouth Retirement Board represents approximately 900 retirees. The people that will most likely apply for assistance in this program are people that have been retired for a number of years, and they're getting on in age. And their average pension back then was $21,000 to $23,000. Doesn't go very far in today's world when you're trying to balance your mortgages, your rents, your food, your heat, and everything else, let alone, as Susan Page said, if you get a diagnosis and you need to be at the doctor's with co-pays 3 to 5 times a month, that's $50 out of your pocket right there. So we're hoping that this fund will grow some legs, get going, and we urge you to support this tonight with your positive vote. And again, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Of course. Mr. Canty first, and then Mr. Bledsoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think this is a great program. I'm glad to see us give this opportunity to provide some relief to people in unexpected situations, or maybe in situations that they planned for one way and then they developed in a different way, which often happens in these types of situations, planning for retirement, unexpected illnesses, things like that. So I think this is a great program. Do we have an estimate of the demand that this program would see in a year? If we're thinking if everybody donated $1 every week and it would be $50,000, do we have a sense of what's going to be coming out of the fund at all based on prior years or speculation, or do we have any data on that?
Well, all I can add to that is that myself, I usually receive every couple of months a phone call from someone who's in a situation, and do I know ways that they can find help? Warren Otino, our vice president, gets more calls than me. So there is definitely a need.
Mm-hmm.
And once people see how it goes, what they have to do, hopefully they will come forth and fill out the application.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is the application is confidential.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to put it in a book or make a list or anything like that. So, Tom, you want to add?
Good evening, everyone. Tom Pinto, Insurance Advisory Chair. I think, again, we don't know what the number's going to be, but I think when we talked about this at all our meetings, it's not like a collective bargaining agreement that most of us deal with. I think we have the flexibility to adjust on the move and to be able to make changes if needed. If we need to change something, I think we can come together as a committee, have a discussion, and be able to adjust as we see fit. If we hit any road bumps, that'll be something we can work around. We're hoping it goes smoothly, but we're not sure. But and just to kind of follow up with everybody, we really do appreciate it, and I think it's extremely important because one day we're all going to be retirees, and I think I will be supporting it and donating to it. So I just think it's a great program for our retirees. But
Charlie?
You all done, Kevin?
I was not.
Okay, good.
That's okay.
Go ahead, go ahead, Kevin. You're vice
Thank you.
chairman, so
I appreciate that.
you outrank me.
So once it's been in operation for a while, once we see what's coming out of that fund, and also once we've had the opportunity to strategize how best to do it, I have an idea of how best to do it, but it would be nice to, based on Mr. Weber's oft-sung refrain of the employees reaching into their own pockets, I understand that. I think a lot of programs like this in various forms involve some type of employer match, and it might be, maybe we could do that with like free cash at some point, we make a revolving fund, we could park it in there, and then have a revolving fund come out for an employer match particularly as the fund is just starting, to get it up there, because we don't know how much is going to be coming out, and we don't want, what if we had this, before, say we had started this in 2015, right, and had a certain amount of money, and then COVID hit, and then a lot of retirees had some, got long COVID or got significant medical expenses from having COVID in a way that was unanticipated, and also all the other expenses that from people deferring care on their other health issues because of COVID, right? It would be nice if we had a buffer in there so that we don't, if something like that happens again, which hopefully it does not, but that there'd be some cushion that it would be a sustainable fund in the long term. So if we could, we don't have to solve that particular problem tonight, but once we have an idea of what the year-to-year, regular year demand is, and how to best do some type of an employer match to not only put more money in the fund, but also to encourage more active and retired employees to contribute, that are willing and able to contribute, I think that would be a laudable addition to the program. Thank you.
Charlie?
I think this is a great program, great job, and I think, you know, year to year, if this builds up, which I hope it does, you may be able to change use. Maybe you can help somebody with more than just co-pays. So this is a great thing. When I was running for selectman, I was lucky enough, I got invited to one of the prayer meetings. And I can tell you right now, my eyes were opened up. And I went to a lot of, I did a lot of work learning things about the town, about the shape of the buildings and different, the police, the fire, all these. But I'll tell you, one of the most impressive meetings I went to was the prayer meeting. I sat in the room, it was an hour and a half, I think it was, the meeting. And I listened to issues like the co-pays, about the prescription drugs, and how we had people that have worked their whole life for the town of Plymouth and can't even pay their prescriptions, to the point where there was people that were getting their prescriptions every other month, paying them every other month. And it was unbelievable. And I'll tell you, one of the members actually broke down in tears speaking about it, talking about how bad it was. And I was just amazed. And I said something that, as a politician, you shouldn't do. You never make promises. But I told Susan, and I remember this quite frankly, that I said, so I'm going to make one promise. I will do anything I can legally to help you. And I thought we could, I was thinking about the co-pays and found out we couldn't do it. But anything legal that I could do. And tonight, what you folks have come up with this program is just a start of helping out. And I hope we can do more things like this to help the people that, you know, the people at home that if they don't understand that our employees, our public employees, are the backbone of this town. And I'm not saying it because you're sitting in front of me, but it's true. Take a look at our parks and recreations. Take a look at the police and fire, what they do for you. We get a great library. I could go on and on about the schools and about the clerical. If you hang around this town hall and you see what they do, see what the human resources has to put up with, and you know, it just what our administrative assistant does up on the fourth floor, and a licensed person, the grant writer, just the things that the employees do. They're the backbone of this town, and I think we have to do anything we can legally to help them out. So this is a great thing. I'm certainly voting for this, and I'm proud. I'm proud that we're doing this. So anyway, thank you for your efforts.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you. I just wanted to address something that Mr. Bletzer touched on. The article of organization, so to speak, of our committee. I want to just read it to you because it encompasses things that Mr. Bletzer was addressing. The Plymouth Retiree Assistance Fund was established to provide financial assistance to help reduce the cost of out-of-pocket medical expenses to eligible retirees of the town of Plymouth and Plymouth Public Schools who are facing a financial hardship. The assistance provided by this fund will help cover costs for retirees' medical expenses to include co-pays, prescriptions, and other out-of-pocket expenses. This program is funded solely by voluntary employee and retiree donations. So I think that addresses what you were asking, Mr. Bletzer. It doesn't just cover co-pays, but it covers prescriptions and out-of-pocket expenses. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments on the board? Silvio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss if I didn't echo what everybody said. I don't want to get too sentimental about this, but I must say that in the 14 to 15 years that I've been in public employment, I've never worked on anything like this. The level of collaboration that we had with the group, with PRIA, with the unions, with the IAC, with the retirement board, and on our side is something that I've never seen before in any other community I've ever worked on. And I will say that fully honestly, that in my time in the public sector, this is probably the most proud endeavor that I've ever been a part of. I mean, I've worked in bigger projects, I've worked in a lot of things, we've helped people out throughout the years, but this is probably the most proud that I've ever been to be a part of a group. So I am so appreciative of this, and honestly, this is the reason why I worked in this community. Because I don't know of any other community that thinks about employees and retirees like we do here. And to me, to us, as a community, this should be a proud day, because we're leading the way in this regard, and we're showing people how we can take care of our retirees in the future. Thank you.
Well said.
And one last thing, as Sue Page says all the time, this is not a handout, this is a helping hand.
It's nice to see people helping one another, and I'm all about that, so I'm very happy. I was just asking, I don't know where this goes or where it's set up, that if there was a business or an organization that wanted to make a contribution to the fund, that you, when you set it up, if it's possible, you set it up that way, like in veterans, for instance. You know, if there's a business or an organization can give a donation, and they give it to the veterans naturally, so.
Mr. Chairman, maybe a new nonprofit could do something.
The cigar bar, where'd he go? No. So, I mean, just so that you can take in some, because I know there's people out there that would also help out that way. So don't miss out on that while you're doing it, to do that. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, the wish of the board?
Make approval. Second?
Approve, motion by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion. Mr. Bletzer.
I vote yes.
Mr. Helm.
Yes.
Mr. Canty.
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Congratulations. Okay. ISO New England, Mr. Johnson. Thanks, Mark.
See ya. It's good to see you. Tell Derek, thank you. I appreciate it.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Eric Johnson, Executive Director of External Affairs for ISO New England, the independent system operator for the New England Power Grid. We're based in Holyoke in Western Mass. Happy to be back at the invitation of Mr. Mahoney to share a high-level overview of what's happening in New England with the regional power grid. I'll walk through some slides, and happy to take questions as well. To set the stage for our organization, we are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the input that we have from the states to our function here in New England. So as the grid operator, we have three primary areas of responsibility that FERC has granted to us. And working left to right, the grid operation is our first responsibility. We started this in 1997. And we are coordinating the operation of the bulk power system in New England. So we have multiple transmission companies in the region. You could think of companies like National Grid and Eversource. Together, they comprise the New England power system, and they operate within their service territories, but we oversee the whole grid. And you could think of us as like the air traffic control for the power system. So we operate the grid, but we don't own the grid. And when we say high voltage transmission, this is the power lines that you would typically see on the higher poles crossing the highways. The poles that you see in your community are part of the electric distribution system. We don't operate down to that level. The second responsibility we have is administering wholesale electricity markets for the region. So we provide a platform for buyers and sellers, and we think of them as our customers. We don't have a relationship with retail customers, so we don't have a relationship with individual residential or commercial customers. Our customers are the power plants, the transmission companies, and the competitive suppliers who might be buying and selling in the wholesale market. And so you could think of us like New York Stock Exchange. We provide a market platform for buyers and sellers. We also don't buy directly, and we don't sell. We're really just providing that platform. The third area of responsibility is to plan the transmission system for the future. So we do forecasting continually. How much electricity are we going to use in the Boston area, in each state in New England, roll it up into New England? We need to make sure that the transmission system can support the growth and demand, and we'll show you where that's going. A number of things that we don't do. I get nothing on the retail side. We don't own assets. As an independent system operator and employees of the organization, we abide by a code of conduct, and we don't have any financial interest in any of the companies that operate in the marketplace. We only operate the electric transmission system. We don't have any jurisdiction or management over the fuel supply for any of the power plants that are putting power onto the grid. And finally, if there's a decision to build transmission in the region, that would go through a state siting proceeding. We don't have jurisdiction over the siting and the routing of transmission. We would look at the interconnection of transmission to the grid to make sure that the grid is reliable. When we think about the wholesale market, we have a little more than 500 buyers and sellers in the market. And the value or the price of electricity at wholesale in the region varies year to year. This is looking back from 2012 to last calendar year. And you might wonder, well, why are prices higher or lower in some years than others? When we see fuel costs high, we see wholesale electricity prices are high. When we see fuel costs come down, we see wholesale electricity prices come down. The green bar at the bottom is the energy. That's the amount of electricity we're using right now in this room and all around the region. The blue bar is the capacity market. We pay resources to have enough capacity on the system to meet the peak demand. That's part of our planning function. And then that orange slice is we need to have some resources that are operating on standby. So if a power plant trips offline, people's lights don't go out, we have other resources that come on quickly. So all of those different market functions are overseen by the ISO. The value varies year to year. Last year was actually one of the lowest years in the wholesale market because we saw a significant reduction in gas prices. I mentioned we're regulated by FERC, so there's a lot of oversight in the markets, not only by the ISO, but our federal regulator. So while we operate the power system for the region, we have a lot of interaction with our stakeholders. Those are the companies that own assets that are part of the grid, as well as the New England states. And you can see on the right side, we work with governors, attorneys general, policymakers, we work with the legislatures to help them understand our role of planning and operating the bulk power system. If you zoom way out, our grid in New England is part of something called the Eastern Interconnection. It's actually one of the largest machines in the world. So the power grid that we're a part of goes from the Rocky Mountains to the East Coast and down to Florida and up into parts of Canada. The other two grids in the United States are on the other side of the Rockies, the Western Interconnection. And then if you know your U.S. history, you know the Lone Star State. They do things kind of on their own. So Texas has its own interconnection. There are very weak transmission ties between the Texas system and the other regions. So while they look like they're part of this system, they're in some ways an island. So if you look at New England, you can see that we are on the sort of far edge of the Eastern Interconnection. The only entity that's even further out is the Maritimes. They operate the power system that's also part of the Eastern Interconnection. Quebec is shown in dark gray. We actually have a lot of transmission between New England and Quebec. There's more transmission under construction, and we bring in a lot of power from Quebec in the form of hydropower. If we zoom into the New England system, this is basically the highway system of electricity. So it's not the transportation highways, but the blue lines are the backbone of that system. So you can think of like the I-95s of the New England transportation system. That's the equivalent on the electric grid side. And if you go to the north in Maine, you can see there's transmission that goes to the border. That means we're able to move power in and out of New Brunswick, transmission in and out of Quebec, and then lots of ties with New York. So As a whole, New England is a net importer on an annual basis. We bring electricity in from our neighbors.
John?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Eric, the blue line, is there a point on the blue line that stops 4 miles south of here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so this blue represents the 345,000 volt, very high voltage lines. We call them 345 kV for short. That system was built around the nuclear plants in the region. So if you follow those lines, they'll go to all of the existing or former plants. And we're now seeing that those sites are becoming points where they're interconnecting offshore wind, as an example, because they have the transmission capability to move power, even though they don't have generation on site.
Okay, so I didn't know that about the blue line. So a follow-up question. When you look at the former power plant in Rowe, Massachusetts, or Wiscasset, Maine, or Vernon, Vermont, where those nuclear power plants are now closed, do those lines, so what you say, 345 kV, they still end up in those places and they're just standing there idle?
Well, they would reconfigure the transmission so that it's now moving power from other sources of supply. So there's not a generator that's gone onto that site.
Correct.
But the transmission system around that site is able to absorb power that's put onto the grid by other resources. And we'll talk about it, but
Okay,
that's mostly
thank you.
been natural gas. So the fact that it terminates at that plant site does not mean we can no longer use the transmission system.
Right. The question was, is that sitting there now just obsolete, just gathering dust, but it's not?
No, we're actively using that transmission facility. So on an annual basis, between 13 and 19% of our energy is imported into the region. If we think about the types of energy we're using in New England, this is 3 snapshots in time. 2000 is sort of the beginning of competitive markets that we administer in New England. 2023 is simply the last calendar year. And 2040 is a scenario that looks into the future. And we built this based on a Massachusetts study, which is referenced in the bottom, that kind of forecasts what state policymakers think the future is going to look like. But a couple trends that you can see in the oil and coal, at one point, if you can believe this, produced 40% of the electricity in New England combined. Now it's fractions of a percent. So most of the coal in New England has retired. We had a number of plants along the coast. The last is in New Hampshire, and they've recently announced plans to close the coal plant and repower it with some renewable energy. So oil and coal are going off the system. We've seen natural gas increase substantially. It now produces about half of the electricity in New England. And people would say, well, what about renewables? They haven't really moved much between 2000 and 2023. But as I'll show you in a minute, the state's goals for increasing the amount of renewable energy are really just ramping up. So we'll see what that number looks like. But in 2040, we're going to see gas drop down to about 10% of the energy mix because we're going to need to have a lot more renewables on the system to meet the climate and decarbonization objectives of state policymakers. Yes?
Eric, on nuclear, you're looking at 20% today. So Seabrook in New Hampshire, and there's one in Connecticut?
Yes. So we have two sites, and those are the two.
So if you got that in 2040 going down to 13%, that's anticipating the one in Connecticut closing or the one in New Hampshire?
Nope. So this is just looking at percentages. So as you add more renewables, the percentage of the pie shrinks,
Yep.
but the output of the plants we expect will be about the same.
So the expectation is those 2 plants will still be online 16
Correct.
years from now?
Right. Well, they're actively going through relicensing with NRC anyway.
Okay.
Of course, here you understand where this community fits into this picture, but we've seen a lot of retirements over the years. Why have coal and oil plants retired? Well, one, the compliance with environmental regulations are significant, requires a lot of capital investment, and we're not going to be operating plants that emit high amounts of NOx, SOx, and CO2 emissions in the future. And as we showed in the last slide, they run very little. They're basically manufacturing plants, and if you're not manufacturing your product on an annual basis, eventually that plant is going to go offline and retire. So generators that have closed are marked in orange. That's most of them. Generation at risk, these are primarily the remaining oil plants. They also run very infrequently, typically only when we get into a cold snap in the winter. So we see those resources retiring in the next 5 to 10 years, if not sooner. And the decision to retire is the decision of the owner of the plant. The ISO doesn't make any determinations on that directly. So I mentioned the shift from coal and oil to natural gas. So as we made that transition in the region, we've seen significant reductions in these three categories of emissions. If you were to look at this chart during January or February of a cold snap, you would see a spike in emissions. But for the most part, we've seen a significant reduction. And today, most of the carbon emissions in the region actually come from transportation. So motor vehicles, we've really taken a lot of the carbon out of the electric grid itself. So what's driving this sort of change in the resource mix? There's two dimensions to this. State laws have sought to decarbonize not only the grid, but other sectors of the economy, and that includes transportation and buildings. So most of the New England states want to reduce carbon by at least 80% by 2050 below 1990 levels. But then the states also not only want to get carbon out, but they want to set pretty clear and aggressive targets to increase the amount of renewable energy, and those are what you see represented here. So this is an input to our planning of the system to know where are the states driving the system. So we administer what we call a generator interconnection study queue. So if somebody wants to build a power plant in New England, they would come to the ISO, and we would look at the interconnection to make sure that grid interconnection is reliable. You can't plug in a power plant and have it create problems on the transmission system. So there may be times where the transmission system needs to be reinforced, or maybe the project is distant from a transmission line and they need to build a transmission line to connect to it. So we would identify those types of things. But you can see there's a lot of proposals for new resources in the region, almost 40,000 megawatts. Today, we have about 31,000 megawatts. So this would more than double the amount of capacity on the system. But if you think about where this was coming from, wind and solar resources are not going to be producing at maximum capacity all the time. They're heavily dependent on the weather. And then the other category is battery storage. Battery storage isn't really renewable or clean. It's just absorbing, charging and discharging based on whatever's operating on the system. The other shift is between sort of then and now. The queue used to be dominated by natural gas-fired generation. There's almost no proposals currently for building new gas-fired generation. It's almost entirely wind, and you can see on the right side largely offshore wind, and Massachusetts is the big driver of that activity. So we don't look at a project and say, yeah, that would be a great place to put it, or we like that technology. We're agnostic on that. We're just from an engineering perspective, making sure that if you connect a resource to the system, it can operate reliably. When we think about forecasting future needs for the region, demand growth on the electric grid has been essentially flat for a number of years. That's because states have invested a lot in energy efficiency, and we're also seeing a lot of solar come online, as I'll show you in a moment. So where is the growth going to come from? Well, as we electrify buildings, we're going to see significant growth, about 3,000 megawatts for heating. And if we electrify vehicles, we'll see growth there as well. So when we think about when we use the most electricity in New England, for the past couple of decades, that's been in the summertime, driven by air conditioning. In the time before the 1990s, we were a winter peaking system. We're actually going to shift from a summer peaking back to a winter peaking system as we electrify. And you can see on the right-hand side, if you can see on the top right, it says 57 gigawatts. It's 57,000 megawatts. That's double the demand on the grid at the all-time peak. So take New England's demand for electricity and double it in the 2050 timeframe. We're going to have to add a lot of new resources to serve that demand on the grid and a lot of transmission. If you zoom in on the solar resources, on the left-hand side, you can see the number of installations. So Massachusetts, more than 150,000 installations of solar, totaling a little over 3,000 megawatts of capacity. And we're really just getting started because our forecast shows there's going to be almost 12,000 megawatts of solar on the system. Again, that's only producing energy during the daytime. We don't get any output from the solar plants at night, obviously. So from a grid operator's perspective, we're managing New England's demand for electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The control center for the ISO never closes. We're constantly looking at what time is New England going to wake up tomorrow? Is it a Monday? Is it a holiday? Is it a weekend? All those things factor into the forecast and what you would call the load profile here. So the top line, which includes the dashed line, is what we would think of as the typical demand for power in New England. And it would peak sometime in the noon time frame, and then it would dip off a little in the afternoon, second peak in the evening. As you've added solar to the system, the demand for electricity is still there, but it's off the grid. It's off the grid that we operate. So if you put solar on your rooftop or solar in your community, for the ISO, it looks like a reduction in electricity demand. If it's a cloudy day, people don't say, well, we've got solar, so we shouldn't use electricity today. No, they just use their normal electricity and it goes back on to the grid. So we're constantly trying to forecast, okay, what is the demand for electricity? We're now forecasting what is the solar output of the panels that we have in the region. Cloud cover is a major factor in that forecast. And so we've now seen a phenomenon where the peak demand on the bulk power system that we operate is higher at 3 a.m. than it is at 3 p.m. Total reverse of what you would expect, because so much of the demand on the grid from solar has been met by solar, not by the transmission system itself. So this is a big change. This is what they call the duck curve. So the belly of the duck gets fatter as we add more and more to the system. In addition to adding resources in New England, there are proposals to expand additional transmission to our neighbors, both from Quebec. There's a lot of potential in northern Maine, but there's not a lot of transmission to bring it down into New England. So there are proposals to develop transmission there, and then we see lots of activity now for offshore wind that would come ashore here in Massachusetts. So kind of wrapping up here, as we see this big shift in the energy mix in the region, we expect we're going to need to add massive amounts of clean energy to serve a grid that's twice as large in 2050. We're going to need resources that can balance the variability of wind and solar. We're going to need to think about what do we do when the wind is not available and the sun is not shining for days and weeks at a time. You have those sort of droughts, and they experience this in Europe, which is ahead of us with wind technology. So if you're retiring your coal and your oil plants and you start to retire other facilities that you've been relying on, well, what are you going to do in those periods? So there's a question mark over how do we solve that as a region. But we're working very closely with state officials on that issue. And finally, you're going to need transmission. So you can't serve a population with twice as much demand in 2050 without reinforcing that transmission system. So with that, there's a couple of information resources. We have some copies here I'll leave with you, but appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the work that we're doing on behalf of the region. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Mr. Canty?
So I grew up in West Plymouth. There were large power lines running through that section of town. Are those your level of lines, or are you even bigger than that?
Those are probably the high voltage transmission system, correct.
Can you go to back to the slide with it's kind of like a pie chart, but in a bar graph form with the power in 2020, 2023 and 2040? So I guess what stood out to me the most the first go-around was the natural gas. I mean, it was 12% in 2000, now it's 49, and then it's going to go back to 12. So I know you mentioned that we import some of our power. Are these natural gas plants within the New England region that we're getting this power from, that we're invested in over the last 23 years and are then going to go away? Or is this, we're making it up with external natural gas and we're going to be putting more resources either in our system or in those systems that we're going to be weaning off natural gas?
So all of the fuels that are represented here are internal to New England.
Okay.
So it's not talking about importing
a source
generation that's gas-fired from outside of New England. It would be produced with a gas-fired resource here.
Okay. So what is this similar to John's question earlier about nuclear, where the two plants are not going to go offline? It's just we're bringing up the other numbers. That's why it's going from 49 down to 12? Or are there going to be a lot of natural gas plants closing, or both?
So in order to meet the state decarbonization goals across the region, and Massachusetts is clearly a leader in this space, we're going to get more and more of our energy from renewable resources. Most of that's going to be offshore wind. We're already seeing solar as well. We're not going to be able to operate the gas fleet at the level of production we are today and satisfy those climate goals. So it's not like the absolute amount is the same, but the percentage change. The amount of electricity produced by natural gas is going to have to drop substantially to accommodate the growth in the renewables. So the renewables are going to displace production from the gas plants.
Okay. Do you know where the nearest natural gas plant is to us?
You have...
Salem? The one in Salem?
Yeah, so in Salem, Massachusetts, it used to be a coal plant, and they repowered that, so that is a gas-fired power station. In Rhode Island, you have the Manchester Street stations. Those are gas-fired power plants.
Okay.
Some of them are gas-only. Some of them have the ability to switch to fuel oil as a backup, but they're primarily gas-fired plants.
And what, I mean, I guess you kind of alluded to it earlier, but one of the issues with, as I understand it at least, with the renewables, with solar and wind, is those drought periods that you talked about, and that base load power being an issue, so that there's, power in there, and then you can have the peaks and valleys, and you have battery storage so that you can sort of time shift that power. But what's going to be the base load of the future if we're taking natural gas, oil, coal, and we're seeing a decreasing appetite for nuclear? Can you...
So I would say the portfolio is likely to be the output of the existing nuclear fleet. We're not at this point seeing proposals for more nuclear power, although it could happen. So you take that as the base load, then you take the output from the wind, mostly offshore wind, and that would be part of the base load as well, although it would have very different operating characteristics. Nuclear plants have very constant output for months.
Right.
The wind is going up and down day to day.
Okay.
The other source would be the imports of hydropower. So it doesn't come to us as hydropower, it just comes to us as power.
Yep.
And there are proposals to build additional import capability from Quebec.
Okay.
So we would have the ability to bring in more over that system. And then solar. We saw solar is about 3,000 megawatts now. The state's incentives are going to drive that to about 12,000.
Okay.
So we're going to have even more solar on the system. So base load will be performing differently, but nuclear, imports, offshore wind, solar, and then the gas plants or some other resource that's flexible is going to be balancing the system. That'll be the future.
And do we import more power than we export, or does it vary?
On an annual basis, we are a net importer.
Net importer.
Yeah, about 13 to 19% is imported.
Net.
That can change on any given day.
Sure.
But historically, we've been an importer.
Okay. And what about small modular reactors? We've heard some talks about that for nuclear. Is that Is that something that you're anticipating? You mentioned that you're not seeing new nuclear applications, but that's something that I've heard of on the horizon.
So any resource that wants to connect to our system has to be commercial, has to be ready to go.
Okay.
We don't do any R&D. We don't scope out, future technologies. So basically, an asset owner would come to us and say, I got something that's ready to put power onto the grid. We certainly can accommodate small modular nuclear reactors, but you could look globally and not find those in existence right now. So this is a emerging technology.
Okay.
It would be great in terms of providing baseload power. It's not dependent on a fuel source. It's sort of a more distributed resource. So there are a lot of advantages to it.
Sure.
But it's probably not economic at this point.
Okay.
It would be very capital intensive for somebody to build nuclear. And in New England, we've seen sort of the opposite. We've seen shutdown of nuclear facilities.
Right. There's certainly I would say in this country, as I alluded to earlier, a decreasing appetite for nuclear power.
Yeah. So part of it's the economics. The older, smaller reactors are not competitive for the most part in a market where you have highly efficient gas-fired generation. But there's also a lot of very strong local opposition in some cases.
Yes.
As you know.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? John?
Eric, again, thank you for coming in. I appreciate the chairman putting this topic on the agenda. I don't know how much you have until retirement, but you know, if you're still working 5 years from now, you should come back and give us another update.
Okay.
Having said that, do you have a like a control room, a master control room for the region? Is that in Holyoke?
Yes. So we operate that facility. It was built the new current version was built in 2006. And for redundancy purposes, we have a backup facility we operate in Connecticut. So if we had some type of an event in Holyoke that compromised our ability to operate there, we could relocate to the backup facility. And we have actually reliability standards that require us to have that ability. And so that's in place.
And if any of us ever wanted to visit that, that's possible?
We'd be happy to have the council come out and take a tour. Love to show you the facility.
Okay. So you're talking about redundancy, and we heard the term base load, and you mentioned economics with respect to nuclear power. So the former owner entity of the facility that was just south of here, I'm guessing it was 2017, they made the announcement that this is no longer economically viable, and they closed the plant and went offline Memorial Day weekend of 19. So I think Seabrook opened in 86. I don't know when the facility in Connecticut opened up. But if you're anticipating Seabrook being still open in 2040, that means they'd be 54 years old by then. But are the owners of those two plants, they're not getting any sort of federal subsidy, are they? Are they still able to make a go economically?
So there's not a federal subsidy for their operations like an appropriation. There is currently in place within Connecticut. They have a contract with the nuclear plant at Waterford, the Millstone Power Station, for half of its output. And the Seabrook facility also participated in that agreement. So Connecticut has a contract for the output of half of the Millstone plant and a piece of the plant in New Hampshire.
So
they're basically the
being guaranteed revenue from the state of Connecticut.
It's not guaranteed revenue. They're basically buying the energy on behalf of consumers in the state. So it's not like they're just writing them a check. They're making an agreement to buy the output, and then that's used to serve the customer load. And there's arrangements between the utilities that do all the transactions. But that was a move by Connecticut to keep the plant open, and there's a lot of reasons why they wanted to do that. Reliability, jobs, and it helps them meet their carbon reduction goals and politics.
Sure. So moving forward, and you talk about solar, at nighttime, the sun goes down, it's not producing, the wind's not blowing, so the turbines aren't turning. Overall, in New England, is it safe to say that the infrastructure that carries the power is kind of antiquated? That has to be updated? Not only does it have to be updated and modernized, but it has to be expanded because we have to take on so many more megawatts to get into the system to be prepared for future needs?
I would say that the transmission system is strong in terms of its ability to meet the peak demand today and into the future. We are required to make sure that's the case. So I wouldn't look at the transmission system today and say it's a weak transmission system. We've invested $20 billion in the system over the past 2 decades in the region, but that system that we have today won't serve the 2050 demand, which will be double. So we will need to make investments for the future. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be clear-cutting and building new rights-of-way with lots of new transmission. They might take an existing right-of-way and an existing transmission, and they might upgrade what's on the poles and wires there. Or they might have to upgrade some of the equipment around the transmission system, the transformation and the other devices. So we're going to do a lot of that stuff before we build new lines as a region, but eventually we're going to have to build more transmission. Part of it is just the undersea cable to bring it ashore for the offshore wind. If we want to build transmission to Quebec, that's going to be new transmission into the region. You mentioned the wind doesn't produce at night, and when we look at onshore wind, there are certainly times when we're not getting production from the turbines. The offshore wind, the benefit of those locations is there's constantly a sea breeze. So we do see a much higher output from the offshore wind than we do from the onshore, which is, I think, why the states are investing so heavily there.
Okay, I'll wrap this up. So last question. The site that is 4 miles south of here, so potentially, in theory, could be 5 to 10 years, fully decommissioned and signed off by the NRC and, technically cleaned up. If a new modern generation nuclear power plant doesn't get permitted and sited there, in theory, what other options are there, with the 300 or 400 acres that are closest to the coast?
Well, for the property itself, we don't look at repurposing existing sites, so that would have to be a developer.
That's what
A developer could decide they want to use that facility, but that wouldn't be an ISO decision. It's not until they say, I want to put power onto the grid from that site, that we would be looking at that directly. That would be our role.
I guess what I'm driving at is if the new generation nuclear reactor is not an option, and it looks like it's almost like natural gas is going the way of the dodo quickly. I'm just trying to figure out what potential options could go there a decade from now.
Oh, okay. Well, I think what we're seeing is offshore wind making landfall and then plugging into those locations where you still have the transmission infrastructure. So you might not have energy production on the site, but it could be...
There was a proposal 5 years ago for a 350-mile long, 10-inch in diameter cable coming in, I think from New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, plugging in theory, to a new building down there and just putting, I don't know how many megawatts into the system.
Yep.
And then that never happened.
But that is one example of how you could
Right.
repurpose that transmission.
Okay. All right, Eric, thank you.
Question for you. I perceive, and I can be wrong about this, so I'm going to ask. The power that's generated from the rooftop solar, given the nature of that duck belly graph, am I correct in believing it's kind of invisible to you?
We don't see it as power in sort of real time. We just see that the demand, as the sun goes up, the demand goes down. It's sort of like the opposite of what you would expect from
So,
something
yeah,
that
so in other
produces
words,
electricity.
you can't track it, you aren't tracking it, I'm just interested in it.
We-
But it is power. It is being used. It is powering people's houses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we do is every day, we have a contractor that provides data to us that says, here was the output of all of those solar facilities. And then we can put that into our model, and then it goes into the forecast for the next day. Okay, how much output did we get today? Let's say we got 5,000 megawatts from these solar panels at the peak.
So you aren't actually measuring that transmission or that addition into the grid, but you can see the impact and account for it. So I guess a question I have for you, on the far right side, that 56% in renewables, does that include rooftop solar?
This would be the solar that would be connected to the transmission system. So if somebody builds a large solar farm, for example, in Maine, there's a solar farm that's about 70 megawatts. That's one of the larger ones today. There's proposals for solar farms that are a couple hundred megawatts. But most of the rooftop solar is not what we would think of as supply in the region. It's a reduction in demand.
It's a reduction in demand. Yeah, it's interesting. But I guess my question is, when you talk about the need for more production by 2040 or whenever it was, are you accounting for the increase in rooftop solar, which is quite a trend right now?
Yes. So we do a forecast each year of PV, which means we work with all of the state energy offices to understand what types of incentives do they have in place to provide rebates or other programs so that people will make those installations. So we know the quantity of solar panels that are out there. We just don't have the ability to read them in real time to know what their output is. But yeah, absolutely.
But you are
it affects the
accounting
demand.
for it. Okay.
We are.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? On behalf of the town, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time and coming and giving us all this information. Appreciate it. And I'm going to take you up on the field trip. I think John will go, so we'll be reaching out.
Yeah, please come see me. And I'd like to introduce Marissa, who's part of our team. She's our liaison for Massachusetts. We'll leave our contact information, and happy to support you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak under public comment? I believe it's Mr. Leiden. Is there anyone online? No? Thanks.
Steve Leiden, Precinct 17. Around a month ago, we had a precinct meeting, and most of it was from the residents of Wareham Road, and they were discussing the problems of Wareham Road, how it deteriorated, and James Downey was there, and James Downey was a wealth of information. James Downey didn't make any promises, but said he would do what he could. Well, this past week, the DPW was there and did a great job. They did that new process where they spray down oil, and then I forget what James said it was, but the road's 100% better. And I wanted you to know, everyone complains about the DPW on the roads, but they did a great job. And James Downey he'll get back to us because there's some more improvements that they want, but he's been great to deal with, and I thought we should let you guys know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment? Town Manager's report, Mr. Brandisi.
All right, so I have a few updates, a number of construction updates. First and foremost, so Stevensville continues to move forward. We're still tracking a July 1st ribbon cutting date. Right now, we're in the process of finalizing the playground. If you go down to location, you see the sidewalks are in place. There's a big amount of dirt that has to be removed. The courts are in place. So things are going extremely well at the Stevensville project. So again, this should be open by early July at the latest. I wanted to bring to the board's attention that last week, the Center for Active Living had their annual Volunteer Appreciation Day. This is the opportunity where we have the chance to thank the number of volunteers who have committed their time and energy towards volunteering at the CAL. In particular, what Michelle Brady does, our Commissioner for Health and Human Services, she tries to total up how much time is worth, and she calculated it was almost about $1 million worth of time that was committed by our volunteers at the Cal. So much appreciation to our volunteers each and every year. Staying on Cal business, next Monday, May 20th, will be the senior prom. That's in quotes, senior prom. So that's an opportunity where the Cal puts on this annual event where seniors can dance with. Typically, it's cadets from Mass Maritime. This year, we have a number of police officers who have volunteered to participate in the senior prom, and will be dancing with a number of seniors on Monday. Moving on to some DPW project updates. So as we all know, if you travel down Water Street, the Water Street project, the sewer interceptor project, continues to move forward. The fences are down. They're starting to put the street back together. We are expecting, this is weather dependent, that the road will be put back together tomorrow into Thursday. And we're hoping that the street will be opened up by Friday. Again, this is weather dependent. They have to lay down the asphalt. And important news on this project, the sewer main is now live. So we're actively using the sewer main. We've shut down the old sewer main that, as you know, travels underneath the harbor. So we will continue to monitor this new sewer main over the course of the summer, and if any adjustments have to be made in the fall into the winter, we'll make those adjustments one final time. But we're excited to close this project. The Bartlett Road Bridge project is expected to be back open at the end of the week. If you go down to Bartlett Road, you'll notice that the guardrail should have been completed today, which is the indication that that road and that project will be complete as well, again, by the end of the week. The Brooks Street Bridge project is still tracking for a June completion date. Public Works Day is Friday, May 24th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is an annual event that's typically well attended by families. This is on Camelot Drive. We will have free food, snacks, a bunch of free gifts, and most importantly, an opportunity for children to get to experience what Public Works employees do, looking at their trucks and their other equipment. June 1st is graduation day for both North and South High School, for those folks that are interested. And then next week, at this board meeting, we will be introducing 3 new recruits from the police department who just graduated this past Friday. So we'll have a pinning ceremony again next Tuesday for those 3 new recruits. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m., the chief of police will be hosting the fallen officer dedication. That is at 10 a.m. at the police department headquarters for those that want to attend. And then you probably remember the fire chief came in with the American Red Cross to promote the Sound the Alarm event. So that was extremely successful. We had 37 homes that participated in this event, and we had volunteer firefighters who installed smoke detectors and CO detectors in 37 homes in this community. So again, great event that was kicked off in this room a few weeks back. In Town Hall, as of yesterday, you can come to do in-person purchase of beach stickers and transfer station stickers. We will do in-person sales through this week through August. That'll be located over here at the Treasurer Collector's Office. Also to note, going out this week is all of our fourth quarter billing for water and sewer. This is important because oftentimes we get folks that call and say they didn't get their water or sewer bill, they didn't get their excise tax bill. So we're trying to promote when the bills go out so residents can look for them in the mail. So as a reminder, the FY24 fourth quarter billing of water and sewer will be going out this week, so please pay attention to your mail. We will have an insert in those bills for the FY25 rates, which you had just adopted a couple of weeks back. So again, just to let folks know that the FY25 rates will change. And then I just want to remind folks that Tomorrow is the last day of in-person early voting. And then on Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., we will have our local election. That's all I have, pending any questions.
Any questions for town manager?
I do.
Mr. Blutzer?
Manomet Point Road, can you tell me the progress on that?
The water project?
Yeah, Manomet Point Road.
We didn't talk about that this morning. We do know it's moving forward. There have been a number of detours that have been established, and hopefully, Mr. Helm, they're better today than they were in the past. But you haven't called me in the last 2 days. That is correct. Mr. Blutz, I have to get back to you as to the timeline on that. I believe that project, though, the main was supposed to be complete in early summer, but they were going to be doing all of the service lines throughout the summer.
So is that water, is that?
That's a water project.
It's a water project, okay, not sewer.
That's a water project.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, because I got some calls too, but, so midsummer, you think?
I would say the main portion, so the main itself, should be complete by midsummer, but we are expecting, last time I talked to the DPW director, that they will be replacing the service lines throughout the summer. So there's still going to be active construction in that area.
Because we don't need any more problems down on Whitehorse Beach, so.
We're plenty enough to deal with down there. I do have one more item, though, the summer schedule. So I met with the chairman late afternoon. So the proposed summer schedule, as you all know, we plan to meet all 4 Tuesdays in the month of June, and then move to a summer schedule in July. So the proposed dates, assuming the board agrees, would be July 9th and July 23rd, and August 6th and August 20th, with a tentative restart date of September 3rd to get back into full session. I'll send that via email just so folks have it in their calendar.
And just to add to that, if something should perk up that needs attention, we can always do a quick Zoom, so we always have that option also, so.
Thank you.
Is that it, Derek? Any
Yes.
other questions or comments for Derek? Okay, we're going to move on to open discussion, and at this time, I just want to say, this is Harry's last meeting, and I told him earlier that it's been a pleasure working with him, and I want to thank you for your service to the community, Harry, and I'm a man of few words, so, but it's been a real pleasure, and I work with a lot of people. Thank you.
Well,
Don't get mushy now, Harry.
well, no, I won't get mushy. But as most people have come to know over the last few years, I'm rarely at a loss for words. I didn't plan to say anything, but I am rarely at a loss for words. This marks the end of a decade of my time in service, as I like to look at it, to the town of Plymouth. People volunteer their time in so many different ways with various different organizations across the gambit and charities. I chose 10 years, a little bit over 10 years ago, to use my volunteer time in town government. The reason for that is that tonight also marks the beginning of movement to the end of about 30 years as a resident of Plymouth. And as my husband and I transition to new adventures down on the Chesapeake Bay. And the opportunity in 1995, when I look at it, I came to Plymouth because Plymouth represented an incredible housing value, quite frankly. But shortly thereafter, I fell in love with this town. And I still feel that love for this town. It's an amazing town with so much potential. But it's also a town that is, in my mind, suffering from some lapses of attention over the past 20 or 30 years. but mostly it's a town that other people, I like to sometimes think of myself back in 1995 as a pioneer in finding Plymouth. Plymouth has been discovered. We are highly desirable. That brings along a lot of unplanned for consequences that I will not be here to help deal with. I've got some thoughts that are going to move forward after I'm gone, and you'll be hearing about those. One big one coming to fall town meeting. But you know, this is an amazing town with an amazing future and so much potential. And if the residents get together, the residents, you know, get educated on how the town works and what is going on and vote, I think this town has a great future. But you know, I'm going to miss it after we go. But I'll be visiting often, and we'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Mr. Blitzer.
Harry, it's been a lot of fun sitting here with you. You know, we've not always agreed on issues, and we've got mad at each other because we're both very passionate people, and we believe in you know, we believe in things, and sometimes we get mad about it if we disagree, but we never let it affect our friendship. The next meeting, we'd get back together and we'd talk, and I've always been able to call you, get information, ask you questions, and vice versa. And I've enjoyed that relationship. And as I said, we kept the left side of this bench. We kept it interesting here. So, but you will be yeah, the left side, stage left. So I'm going to miss you, and I know Tom. You guys are heading out to a beautiful place. If you couldn't find a better place to retire, I don't think. It's a lot like Plymouth, but it's, as I said to Tom tonight, it's a little bit warmer, though. So anyway, I wish you well, my friend.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay? Thank you. Come back and see us.
John?
Yep. Harry, appreciate, again, your service to the community, and I know you spent a long time on FinCom trying to keep Kevin under control. And sometimes you were successful and sometimes you weren't. But I appreciate, certainly, again, echoing what Charlie said, you know, the passion for certain things, the different perspective, and not only keeping us on our toes in open session, but especially in executive. So.
Well, Harry, here we are. I started on the Advisory and Finance Committee on May 12th, 2014. Harry Helm joined us on July 1st, 2014. So I was just 6 weeks in and still the new guy until Harry showed up. It was a privilege to work with you on the FinCom. We started as new members almost at the same time. As I said, you chaired several of the budget subcommittees over time, most notably the school budget subcommittee. When I was chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, you were my first vice chair, which was a role that you completed admirably. You were always willing to cover things that I couldn't attend. You were always willing to contribute at the meetings, pay attention, do your homework, ask questions. You were very engaged, and you were always looking out for what was in the best interest of the community. You were not afraid to speak up when you thought something didn't smell right. You weren't afraid to make a point that you thought needed to be made regardless of who was standing before us, and I think you always represented the Advisory and Finance Committee in an admirable way whenever you were out at a precinct caucus, at town meeting, or talking to people in your community. I always heard very good things about your work, and I certainly always saw your work to be exemplary. It was sad in some ways to see you leave us when you were elected here, but it only took me 2 years to catch up to you there. So it's been a pleasure over the last year to work with you here in our new roles. And it's been an honor, Harry, and I will miss you. And we have something for you. This is a tradition started by, I believe, your immediate predecessor, for individuals that have voluntarily left the Select Board, which is your status. You ran for Select Board once, you were elected, and now you've had enough of us. So this is a copy of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford. We've had an opportunity to inscribe something in there for you, and hopefully it's something that you can remember not only us, but the rest of your community in your new adventures.
This is great. And there will be one particular entry in here that I will laugh at every time I read it.
Can you read that out?
I've already said it out loud once over the airwaves a couple years ago.
Oh, I know
and
what it is.
I will not be repeating that word again. But it's in here if you want to come read it. Thank you all. I will miss all of you.
Go ahead, Charlie. I know
Mr.
you-
Chairman, can I just say one more thing on a serious note? But I see Pat McCarthy out there tonight, and we all know Pat. And I'd like to send my best to her husband, my brother Hibernian, who's has a procedure that he's going to go through, and I wish him well. Say a prayer for him. And Pat, if you need anything, let us know, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. That was, Harry, I got to tell you now that you touched on that. That was one of, that was the best bloop I've heard in 17 years. It really was. That's a good one. Who wrote that? Harry, who wrote that in there? What? Yeah?
But I know it.
Thank you. Well, good luck, Harry, on your new venture. We know we'll see you and Tom. That being said, anything under new business? Letters? Old business? Okay. Adjourn. The next meeting will be held May 21st.
Would Mr. Helm like to make a motion?
Mr. Helm?
Would you like to make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Helm?
I motion that we adjourn this meeting of the Select Board.
I second.
First, second, discussion? Mr. Mahoney? Yes. Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
And Mr. Bledsoe?
I vote yes.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the 21st.